Here we go, everybody. Welcome back to the Blade Dive. Quickly, I'd like to give a shout out to everybody firing up their winter. So if you're in Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, I know I'm missing a few, but I'm stoked for everybody down there. And if you're in North America, I hope you're digging up dirt if you're not on a glacier somewhere. My guest this week in the virtual booth is Chris Meyer, and this conversation has been in the works since, March, April-ish area time frame. And it's been that way because I feel like Chris is somebody that has literally poured his heart and soul into being obsessed with this job. He is so passionate about operating equipment that we really get into discussing how that affects your life and what the aftermath may be. He describes it as being something instead of someone. We dive into the heavy reality of his childhood and what it looked like for him to progress his skill set at the different ski resorts that he's worked at. We discuss the inspirational people that have been a part of his career, and we get into what it looks like for him to attempt to master different snow types. Chris is somebody that's definitely got a cult following online with respect to just his finished product, what it looks like, and how it stokes people out. The caveat to that is that the process isn't understood as to how that finished product got there. The number of requests that I've gotten for Chris to come on the show is astronomical, so I'm excited to give you, the listener, an opportunity to hear him out and develop your own opinion of who he is and not necessarily what he is based on his skill sets. If you're at home right now, you know what to do. Grab your favorite drink, kick your feet up, and if you're in the machine anywhere in the world, turn up the volume.
Give it the juice.
Okay. Another day in the virtual booth of the Blade Dive. I'm stoked you're tuned in. It has been a long week for me, and I'm glad that summer is maybe staying in the Pacific Northwest. We'll see. Speaking of that area, I have somebody that has been around the world in places like Argentina and Australia, but has also contributed to places like Mount Hood Meadows recently, and that is Chris Meyer is with me in the virtual booth today. Excited to have him to talk further about who he is. How are you, Chris? Welcome.
I'm great, Parker. How are you?
You know, I'm great today, man. Thanks. I'm feeling fantastic. I just want to take a minute really quick to say thank you for taking the time to be on the show. It's an effort. There are lots of logistics to coordinate, and so your time I'm grateful for. So thank you so much for giving it to us today.
No worries. Happy to do it.
And right now is a perfect opportunity for me to pay the bills of the podcast and thank our sponsor, Prenoth. They support this podcast, and a lot of what I do is possible because of them. So I can't thank them enough. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so by following us on social media at The Blade Dive and subscribing to the channel, as well as leaving us a review. If you're a fan already of The Blade Dive, make sure you're telling a friend about the podcast. That's another way that you can help this effort grow. That's how this thing definitely spreads and we get the message out there. We have also created a community, I feel like we have over the last 18 episodes, and so episode 19 is moving in that direction as well, with the inclusion of letting folks know who I'm talking to with the push road question of the day. And that's exactly what we've done this week with Meyer, as he and I have worked together to stay in touch and produce this episode. So, Chris, what do you think, man? I think we should kick it off with a push road question of the day, and then I will sprinkle them in throughout the episode. What do you think? You cool with that?
Yep.
Awesome. Here we go.
Push road question of the day.
That is right, the push road question of the day. And we've got a bunch of them that have come in this week, and that's because we are very much attempting to let everybody know who we're having on the show. So it's been really a blast kind of going, hey, we're talking to this person. And so they've just been coming in. I picked a couple more than I did last week for Chris. So, Chris, you've got a couple more headed your way. I will say, if you want to participate in being a part of the Push Road question of the day, all you have to do is look for that to drop on Instagram stories either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on when we record. Yeah, that's it. Super stoked. Okay, so I'm just going to fire them at you. Chris Craycraft has our first Push Road question of the day. And Chris asks, what do you think is the best trend within terrain parks right now?
Best trend in terrain parks. I'm going to say the best trend in terrain parks is it's going to be the flow parks. The parks that people can ride with their kids, their friends. You don't really have to have necessarily a lot of skill to ride, but you can still have fun at a much higher level of skill. So I think that trend is really doing a lot for the industry and bringing more people into riding and enjoying snowboarding again. It was kind of going stale with the basic rails, boxes, jumps, half pipes. I mean, I hate to say it, but I see that's where the industry is going.
Maybe elaborate on the flow park you're talking about. Is it specifically Boley features, or is it, small boxes and rails incorporated? What does that look like? Maybe help us unpack that a little bit.
I was just seeing from, my experience through all the resorts, the, crush with the Holy Bully style type builds really set a good trend in allowing more people availability of features to ride, I guess would say. There's better variety, less consequence. You can go big, you can go small. I think it's just not, you don't have to have a certain skill set to ride these features. You can just go out and have fun on them at your own will, at your own pace, at your own skill. Same thing that we see in skateboarding with skate parks. You build your skill up, not have to be forced into a skill and learn that skill. Say, which is with, half pipes and bigger jumps and large rails. Like, it takes a lot of time, a lot of practice to get good at those things, to have fun with those things. And, the Holy Bully stuff, if you want to call it that, is fun for everybody.
Yeah, it's all about having fun. I'm going to try to sprinkle those questions in throughout the episode, but one that I do want to hit one more before we jump into more about you, and it's part of that. But I've got Castro, Tex, and Clayton Shoemaker asking you, obviously, about how you got the nickname Madman Meyer.
Well, I used to really like to shovel and rake and pimp parks out. For some reason, I just really got into it, making things look proper. And I kind of took it to extreme. I pretty much lived at Bear Mountain 12 to 16 hours a day, every day, all season. And I just wanted to rake. I don't know why, but I just wanted to have perfect parks to ride, good stuff to ride. And, stuff's always getting blown out. So the job just never ended. And I just always was just raking. I don't know why.
So the rake, the tool became an extension of yourself, and that's rad. I mean, it sounds like thus there began your obsession with providing awesome features that look great as well as riding them, and you just wanted to consume something yourself as a product offering that was top notch. So yeah, good on you, dude. Like, you just wanted to rake. Sweet. The other one would be the Jibmaster Chris nickname. Was that something that you gave yourself, that somebody gave to you? How did that one originate? Because I kind of look at that and go, well, is the dude good at rails? Well, how did he get that? How did he get that nickname?
Yeah, that one's kind of funny. It was kind of I guess it was kind of a joke at first because essentially I had more rail tricks than jump tricks, and I rode rails every day and only hit jumps on sunny days. And became to that. And a local kid at Telluride named Josh, he kind of pegged me with that name. And then when my other friends pushed me to start an Instagram, I thought it'd be funny to use that as a name, not knowing anything about what Instagram was.
Fair enough. No, cool insight either way. One of the things that we've kind of been discussing offline that you and I wanted to bring to light was really your obsession with attempting to master different snow types. Your vision there you describe is something that is, you've been to so many different states within the North America region,
Yeah.
but you've also been to Australia, Argentina. So
Yeah, I mean,
I'd just be curious to know what your take on that is, your process.
at first I didn't really care. Like, snow is snow. And I kept hearing people talk about different snow conditions. I started like paying attention and seeing it. Different snow you can do different things with. And then I kind of got really obsessed with it. Kind of like, some people get obsessed with avalanche pack, snowpack. And I haven't went to that depth where got an avalanche cert and understood the different snow packs and layers and facets, and I started looking at the park snow and the park snow crystals and what the snow does and what it does after it sets a little bit. Started paying a lot of attention to what's happening with the snow. Coming from warm climate, Big Bear, coming to a cold climate like Telluride, all of a sudden it was like night and day difference in snow conditions. And I was really obsessed. Like, oh, so this park could look like this in this snow condition, and this looks like this in this snow condition. And I wanted to find a way to make it look the same in all snow conditions. As a rider, sick and tired of hearing, oh, the snow is sugar, we couldn't do this, or it was slushy, and then it froze. Like, I got tired of hearing that shit. So I started playing with the snow types and learning the snow and understanding what's happening. So no matter what the snow is doing, I always had the same product. Having the opportunities to go to South America and Australia to Colorado, and in my recent time in California, I wasn't necessarily getting the building I want. So I really started looking at the snow even more, but from a skilled eye. And I looked at the Pacific Northwest and I was like, there's a beast. Let's play.
So you mentioned something there with respect to your adventure in South America, the time that you spent down there. I know we've caught up offline about what that looked like, but how did you create that opportunity for yourself? Was it something that you were just interested in chasing?
So,
Like the snow year-round thing? Maybe help us unpack that.
Argentina, great people, beautiful country. I went to Argentina, somehow got recruited to come and build a park in Argentina. I don't really remember how or what happened. I know my friend Juan had some influence on it, but I met this guy named Tincho, and he invited me to come down to South America to build for them. They had a legend park builder there right before me. It's a guy I still look up to this day. But Josh Lampert, he was down there before I was, and I knew he could speak Spanish and all that stuff, so there he had no communication barrier. I remember I went to Argentina. The only person that spoke English was the park manager, Tincho. Being an American, it was really weird deal because I was hired by marketing to come in and build a park, but the resort is split into two with marketing and operations there. And operations didn't want nothing to do with me. So when I got down there thinking I was going to build this badass park in South America, I got quickly shut down as soon as I got to the resort. Long story short, they wouldn't let me drive the snowcat. So we sat on that for like a week because they let the other cat driver operate. And we had a big competition coming up, which was like the biggest one for their country in the snow park world, which was the Rip Curl Pro. I remember we going into this, and they're like, we got to build a park. And they're like, that guy's not driving the snowcat. So they put this 50-year-old guy who spoke zero English in this beat up ass snowcat that the wings didn't even move. It was fixed and it had some fucking kind of packer bar on it with a wheel on the back. Some shit I've never seen before, but it was like an original piston bully from what I understand. And that was what I had to build this park with. Was that guy, that machine, and my knowledge. So I very quickly figured out like I'm not going to be able to talk to this guy even with a little bit of Spanish I do know. So I told Tincho we were going to use hand signals, and I told him to relate to the operator what each hand signal meant, and I started using my hand as the blade of the snowcat, more or less conducting him to do the snowcat as I wanted done with the snow. And it was brutal to watch somebody struggle with the language barrier and have me standing outside like, hey man, just do this, but you can't talk to them. So you just had to use hand signals and know what how a groomer thinks, and kind of guessing what he's thinking, not knowing anything about him or his culture, his bringing up, or anything like that. You just had to like say, okay, he's an operator. I know he knows up, down, left, or right, tracks this, that, you know. You can start motioning, back blading with your hands and all that stuff. So we started piecing this park together in that way.
Damn. That's not something that we had discussed, so I didn't know that yet. That's awesome. Overcoming adversity there. What about Australia? Like you were down there doing some Falls Creek stuff, some Star Wars contributions.
I did the Argentina thing for 2 years in a row. The following year, I wasn't really wanting to go back to Argentina just because of like family situation and all that stuff at the time. I just had my first kid that winter at Telluride, and so we had a new baby. I was at home just, doing the normal resort thing. At the time, my summertime gig was a facility maintenance director or manager. And even though I was like pretty decent at all that stuff and remodeling, we remodeled a restaurant, I wasn't really into it. My friend Luke, who was a friend of Ruben Cameron's, he was like, my friend Ruben left Falls Creek and they really needed somebody to come down and build a park. I was like, yeah, no, I'm so down to come down and check it out. Like, yeah, Australia, why not? Let's do it. At the time, I'd looked up at to Ruben as a builder, and I saw the Star Wars the year before and the year before that, and I was like, damn, dude, that's sick. I went down there, thinking like, oh, I could totally, build something like that, and I wanted to build something like that, and I showed up down there, hoping that there was a more experienced builder, quite honestly. Like, I was like way in over my head, and come to find out, they just had some rookie Canadian kid there, and it was like his second year, and he'd come from Whistler, and he wasn't really a park builder. He was a pipe guy, but he was their park builder, and so I ended up having to work with him on this project Star Wars that they all talked about. Like, I didn't really know too much about it. I just knew it was an event, and I didn't really think too much of events. The other guy not having the experience, it all like kind of fell on my responsibility. And I remember like we started the build, and I was kind of feeling it, like, oh yeah, I could build this, and then build a couple jumps. And then the first day of riding, everybody was like, these jumps fucking suck.
Heavy.
I sat there and my cat, like, fuck, dude, everybody just said my shit sucks. And now they want me to rebuild all of it in a shift because it did not work. I remember, like, sitting there thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to fucking even hold a fucking candle to anything Ruben's done. I kind of cried a little bit in my snowcat, a little bit. Maybe not a little bit, but a lot. And I kept having people come up to my snowcat, and I remember, like, my friend PC was like, dude, just do it. This is what you do. This is what you were made for. And I started talking to the American riders, the five guys, and they started telling me how the jump should be. And I just, at that point, I had no other choice, and I sucked it up all my pride and just built exactly what they were telling me to build. Still nothing compared to the years before that built by Ruben. Pretty pumped to have that opportunity and get to do that and hold myself at the skill level I was at the time to those professional builders.
I gotta ask, did you get the chance to connect with Ruben after all that went down, whether there in Australia or later on in your career?
I actually didn't really get the chance to connect to Ruben until years after, talking on the social media, and I finally got to meet him and work with him in person when I got to Holy Bully. I'm glad I didn't even try to hold a candle to that guy, because he's a great person and a great builder. I got a lot of respect for that guy, and he's got a lot of influence in my career, this building, from the June days to Falls Creek days to the Threadbow days that help influence the way I make things look and build.
Very cool. I think by now, man, you know the deal. We take the time to get to know you, how you came to snowboarding, a little bit of growing up, your interests, your childhood. As much as you want to unpack for us, let's do that real quick. Tell us your story.
Right. When I was a kid, I lived in Santa Clarita. It's not the best place to live, but it's all right. Growing up there's no snow. It's just dirt. The highlights of my younger days were my dad and the grandma that we lived with were kind of on the cheaper side, so it was cheaper to buy us a season pass to Six Flags and drop us off than get babysitters. So I spent a lot of time as a kid riding roller coasters at Six Flags, and I guess maybe that's where the fascination with riding rails came from. Maybe. But
well, I gotta say, dude, I'm super jealous of the daycare situation. Six Flags, I mean, obviously adventure theme park that's world famous, and you're just chilling as
great.
a kid.
Kids, no parents to watch us, and it was me and my two sisters at the time, and we get to go, and then they made the water park right next to it, so we got Hurricane Harbor, so spent half a day at Hurricane Harbor, half a day at Six Flags. Going to school out there was a little interesting, as anybody there knows. At least at the time I lived there was a lot of gang activity and crime and a lot of everything going on. And as I got older and wiser, I learned how to use the city transit systems, and I started making friends, and essentially kind of made some good friends, but maybe they weren't the right friends. And I ended up getting in a lot of trouble as a kid. Not really any drug problems. I was more of a fighter. I get in lots of fights, especially being one of the few white kids in the neighborhood. You know, that kind of getting in a lot of fights, I kind of fell into, you know, learning how to, how should I say learning? I kind of didn't always want to be a part of like the that scene, and I'd sneak away and go ride bikes with the other white kids in the neighborhood, and we would go build jumps, and those kids got really good at BMX, and I was doing all right. We built bike trails and we rode bike trails, and that's what we did, and that was life for a while. Spend all day, either shoveling a new bike jump or hitting the jumps that you've been working on for the last 4 to 6 months. And because shoveling dirt jumps by hand, that takes a while. It's brutal work.
Well, dude, like in the heat and everything too?
Middle of the fucking desert. And then kind of going in there, we'd ride bikes in the daytime, but as soon as the sun set and you couldn't ride bikes anymore, you get back into city lifestyle. Nighttimes where I end up getting in a lot of trouble. Always having run-ins with the cops, getting arrested all the time. For a little bit there, I hate to say, I was in a gang. That was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done.
I gotta ask, do you use that period of time in your life as a reminder? Does that serve as a bit of a placeholder you can draw from that and kind of say to yourself when you're going through a rough patch that, shoot, I made it through that, man. I can get through this. Or is it maybe something that is help shape you for the better?
I don't know. It's very, very interesting one. A lot of it came from the lack of parenting, and then the contact I did have. My dad was a drunk. He was a very violent drunk, and I guess a lot of my anger stemmed out from what would happen at home, and I'd get out fresh out of that and be right on the streets, and there was always somebody with a mouth, so it was always an opportunity, and that did all right. Not all right, but I was on a really bad track until I was 15, and the county of LA gave me a choice to either go live with my mom or spend the rest of my childhood in California Youth Authority. I wised up and made the decision to go live with my mom and try to escape all that stuff. And I moved to Big Bear, where my mom had lived. And, I went up there and, right off the bat, I met the wrong people. And I got a little bit in trouble right off the bat. But during while I was getting that trouble, I met a girl, and she brought me up on the mountain at Snow Summit. And she was like, "You need to try snowboarding." And the first time I didn't like it. The second time, I was like, "Oh, this is cool. This is cool." And the third time, it clicked.
That's cool.
I told myself I want to snowboard the rest of my life.
Wow. Really? That's the story. Holy cow.
Yep.
Wow, man. Yeah, dude, that's actually really cool.
And, I guess you can say snowboarding saved the life. Generality, formality, whatever you want to fucking call it. I got no words. I'm not a speaker.
I don't know, man. You're doing pretty good. You're crushing it on the podcast. What was her name that who helped you out?
Jamie. I still talk to her every day. Or not every day, but we talk to her on time. And so, I fell in love with snowboarding and quickly got a job I needed a job. I had to pay my court fines. And I got a job at Bear Mountain as a parking attendant, which to this day was as bad of a job as it seemed. It was actually a really cool job. Really great people. You made a lot of money if you didn't follow the rules.
Oh,
And
look at you.
It was a good time.
Yeah, oh, I bet.
It was also a good way to meet people.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, you probably had, I don't know, some kind of method to the madness, but maybe you were holding a spot for somebody that you knew was going to be a tipper for the day, however that plays out. But did you have a system, or did you have a method, or let us in on that, man?
No, we had a system. We'd team up. There'd be 3 of us, and one guy would park it and skip spots and tell us where those spots are, and we'd rotate gates, and we had our own little thing. I'm not going to blow it because I'm sure somebody's still doing that right now, and I don't blame them.
Oh, man.
Get in where you fit in, right?
Yeah, I guess.
No shame in people trying to make it in this world.
Well, you can't hate the game. You can only hate the player. So if you're hustling and that's your gig with the parking, because parking's an art form, man.
Right.
Yeah, well, shoot, man, we've made the rounds with, I guess, just rewinding a little bit, some folks who have been a part of Bear's team in the past, but you didn't just start out there. It's not like you were given a job. So you're like you got there, you're doing your thing, you got a job working parking, but were you riding Bear? Were you riding Summit after you kind of got used to the board underneath your feet? Was that your outlet the whole time? You were just focused on snowboarding? Was that where your head was at?
Bear and Summit weren't together at that time, so I only had to pass this to Bear Mountain. So the only time I went to Summit was with that girl. And it was mainly night riding after school and all that stuff. But majority of my riding came from Bear. And I had this friend, we'd go up every day if it was, because I was in the VAD kids school, so we got out at noon and we can go ride every day after school. And me and this guy, we get out of school and we go ride. And, we didn't know what we were doing. Looked like a bunch of doofuses out there in our, hoodlum LA clothes.
Yeah, well, you started out like everybody else. You didn't have the gear, and so you used what you had. Is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was the guy. I was the guy who would show up and I'd go snowboarding in my skate shoes. I didn't give a fuck. I just wanted to ride, and we couldn't turn, but we figured out how to hit rails. So we'd come in following leaf and then point it, and then we'd try rail tricks in my skate shoes, and then eventually we got some boots from Reynolds, but that's because they wouldn't let us on the lift with shoes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense.
But we tried.
Nobody wants to get hurt. I get it too, though. Like, you just wanted to snowboard, and you had your pass, but the purchase price or the purchase price of the gear was probably more than you could afford. And I've mentioned that before on the show too. Just access that way, access to being able to have gear. And I know that there are organizations that do great jobs of providing things of that nature to people so that they can ski and snowboard. I want to back up a little bit. You mentioned and discussed what your upbringing was like and what you had to deal with. When you got your out and you transitioned to Bear, was there a portion of that you took with you that you could never really let go of? And did that mess with your ability to adapt? I guess is probably the best way to put it. Did you take that stuff with you and you couldn't let it go at all?
I carried a lot of my bad habits from the city to Big Bear. Like, I'd found snowboarding and I found something to do, but there was still that lingering over me, like the urge to, slap somebody upside their head when they run their mouth, because we know how mountain people like to run their mouth. At least That's what I've learned. And
Well, are you talking about haters, or where you getting at with that?
no, just for some reason, people would just like to talk shit. They just look at you and they're like, "Oh, look at this fucking guy." And at the time, I was still really quick to put a fist in their face, and I had to like really quickly figure a way to control that. So I got into boxing, and I started training boxing, which was a great opportunity, which helped fully steer my life towards snow, because I no longer had to have that urge, because I was able to get it out before it even happened. And I had a lot of opportunities to train with really well-known boxers, and I got to learn from Sugar Shane and Oscar De La Hoya, uh, Fernando Vargas, which I got to spar against him, legitly, which was not a good idea at 16, but it did it. And I remember that was like the hardest time I've ever been hit in my life. At that, I do boxing, and then we'd go and we'd snowboard, and I started to learn how to pound nails and build houses and all that stuff with my friend Ryan, who really like pushed me to like try to create a career for myself. And we were smashing out houses. Probably like every 3 months, we'd have a new house built, and we were just crushing houses, and I was making good money, and I was kind of starting to move in the right path. I wasn't being a bad kid anymore or anything like that. And then everything kind of hit the fan. I was dating that chick, Jamie, who showed me how to snowboard, and she went to the same school as my sister. And I didn't really get along with my sister. Long story short, my sister told my probation officer some bullshit, and I ended up getting hauled off and taken to a boys' home, a place called Boys Republic in Chino Hills. I spent 9 months there being worked over by the wonderful county of San Bernardino. And it was a whole bunch of fuckery. There's too much in there to go in there. Like, they would schedule counselor meetings 3 times a day, one in the morning, one after lunch, and then one right before you go to bed. You had to go to seminars. You went to a full boys' school and a full uniform, and you're pretty much put together with all the other bad kids in the place. And that was pretty tough times, because I thought I was doing good.
Well, okay, so you got there and you're in that situation. Was that a traumatizing experience for you, or were you using that as fuel to get back to Bear?
Something kind of weird happened. I remember vividly all I could start thinking about was snowboarding, hitting handrails, going out and just trying to crush some tricks and be out with my friends and just shred all day long. That's all I wanted to do the entire time in there. So I kind of put all the fighting stuff away, even though I was with like the worst people to ever put yourself in with if you're not trying to get down. And I just stayed focused. And I was able to like kind of finish school in there. And then I graduated the program, and they let me go. And then I was off on my own, and I needed a job. So I went to the first place I knew that would take me in. And I went to Bear Mountain, and I got a job working lift operations. I guess I did the lifty thing for like a half a season. Quite honestly, I ended up getting a little on the boring side. wasn't enough ride time. And I saw instructors, so I decided I was going to become an instructor. And I jumped in and became an instructor at Snow Summit.
Nice.
And the only way to
Did you enjoy that?
I started off teaching kids, so it was kind of fun because kids are always fun as long as they're having a good time. And I kind of worked my way up the whatever instructor levels because each time you got a certification, it got money. And I learned once you got to the higher ones, they let you go into the park. So I started taking all the classes and teaching as much as I could to get myself into the park where I could just teach people and ride park. And in the end, that kind of didn't work out so good for me because all I did was ride park, and I stopped showing up to line up and heavily getting fired. Right.
Dude. Well, so what was next after that? Did you hang it up, or did you kind of go, I just need to move on to something else, different job?
After that, I went back to pounding nails, and I met what later becomes one of my best friends, this guy named Josh Huber. A lot of people up there probably know him, but great person. And we started riding together, and we'd talk about the tricks we were doing. And then somehow we started talking about parks and how the parks weren't always perfect. This is 2001, parks were just still coming out. And we started talking about how, like, one day, if we had the opportunity, we could make perfect parks, figure out a way to do it. And, neither of us knew really what, like, about snowcats or anything like that. What we did know was park crew. And we went to a job fair at Bear Mountain, and he got a job. And I was like over here applying to be an instructor. And he's like, dude, go talk to park crew. And I went over and I interviewed with Clayton Shoemaker and Chris Castaneda. And I'm pretty sure they weren't into it. But Josh talked to him, and they gave me a chance. And I was like super pumped. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm park crew, blah, blah, blah. And the season starts rolling. And I do what every park crew does when they first start. I'm fucking park crew. I'm going riding. I rode every day. Every day. I rode every day for like a month. And I got called into the office by Clayton and Chris. And Ola was there. And they sat me down. They're like, you don't start doing some work, you're not going to have a job. And I walked out of there so pissed off. Like, fuck these dudes. Fuck it. Whatever. Like, I don't need this stupid job. I'll go make money pounding nails. And the next day, I came back out. For some reason, I just started shoveling. And I started getting into it. And I could hear the people getting stoked. Like, oh, that looks so fun. Thank you. I started to feel off of that and get pumped on it. And then I moved to the next feature. And then I did that for about 2 months. And then Clayton comes up to me. He's like, dude, you crush it. You should come on the night crew. So I started installing rails with Clayton and this other guy named Joe Mertez, which I think he might be in charge of the interior project. But we started working night crew and find out really how to put rails in. And it was me and this guy and Clayton and the cat. And Clayton would come in, push a pile of snow and set a feature. And we'd set that feature by hand on the pad. And then he'd come and push a little snow for a takeoff. And then we'd hand shape the takeoff. And I started really enjoying that aspect of it at night, being out there alone with a rig, just having all the time in the world to pimp shit out. You know, Well, we sit there and pimp stuff out, and it was also an easy way to keep warm. It's not very warm at night.
No, no, it's definitely not. And I remember just coming in for day crew shift in the morning, and sun out, bluebird, but frigid temperatures, and typical. If you're in the snow industry, you're gonna work around snow, so it's gonna be cold. But I remember James Lauer just pacing at the top of the park, and basically just bear hugging himself, like rapidly moving his arms and smacking them back and forth, just to warm up. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? And he was like, man, I'm warming up, man. We got to get this going. There's nothing we're going to overlook here. We're going to be here all morning. We might get down at lunch.
Right.
But we're going to work our asses off right now. So let's.
So I started doing that. And then I met one of my now good friends, Nate. And he kind of shared the same vision. Like, why can't we ride perfect shit and do all this? And I remember we were doing it all by hand one night, and we're just like, fuck this. We're just tired of doing handwork. So we called one night. We were just sitting there and we're like, let's get a different cat driver, not meaning any offense to Clayton at the time. We're just like, let's see what a guy with a lot more experience could do if we just told him and asked him. So we went and we begged Tex to come help us set a down rail. And I remember sitting in the cat and having Tex listen to us, tell him what we want. And he made it exactly how we wanted it. And when we got out, there was almost no handwork to be done on that rail. And we're like, no fucking way you can do this with a cat. And then we started seeing like other places kind of doing it, like Mammoth doing it, a cat, and we're kind of like, oh, why can't we do everything with the cat? But, for another 2 months, we still did it the other way. And I remember going to Bear Mountain every day. I'd show up in the morning. We'd start the rake lap and then we'd go and ride, and then do another rake lap, and then we'd close, and then I'd still stay and go out at night and go out with Clayton and set rails because nobody else wanted to stay late, and I didn't mind the money. I'd ride around with the other cat operators like No Money Mike and Desi, more time with Tex. Anytime I could, I'd go jump in a cat, not just to stay warm, but to like kind of like see what's going on and understanding, because I didn't get any of it at the time.
Yeah, who do you think you spent the most time learning from or riding along with? Was it Desi, Clayton?
I definitely spent the most time with Clayton.
Cool.
I spent hours and hours with Clayton, and he wasn't the best operator, at least compared to the guys he was up against at the time. But I was able to see and watch him learn and learn with him at that time. And I jump in and ride with somebody like Desi and watch him bust out a big old jump real quick and make it look all sick. And I'm like, damn. And then go over to Clayton and watch Clayton do it, build a rail. And I just always jump back and forth.
So cool that you had that, you know what I mean? And you had that opportunity to sit with two people that were pretty impactful at that point in time in the industry that were building parks, because I need to get Clayton on the show. Clayton, come on the Blade Dive. I always viewed Clayton as this tenacious, motivated, incredible rider who was always contributing to the parks and then eventually was on the crew and then building and then riding the stuff that he was building, contributing to large-scale builds.
I remember.
But, dude, Clayton's a smart guy.
Because that was the year when Bear Mountain first became the park. And that was such a, I feel like that was such a turning point in, the park industry, because that was the first all mountain park, right?
What year was that? Was that like
And
2001, 2002? Clayton will fact check it for us.
I think it was like 2003 or 4.
Yeah, when that was happening, I remember definitely looking at other park programs, other publications of parks, and just comparing, and obviously comparison is never really a good thing, but it is a motivator. I would say that much about it. So you're there and you're gaining an interest in operating a machine, a snowcat, but were you still focused on your snowboarding? Because I know you just mentioned all this passion. Yes, you mentioned all this passion about learning to ride.
And I remember in that time we started getting like a lot. Me and my friend Nate, we started getting like a lot better on our snowboards. So we kind of started branching out of the park, and we started going the street rail level. And we'd go out and hit street rails. Sometimes we'd come in the morning and go warm up in the park, and then we'd cruise around Big Bear and hit, all the handrails in town that we could, making little edits and trying to be the go pro or whatever you want to call it at the time.
Like a sponsor me video?
Pretty much. And I think that combined with the raking all the time, just nonstop shoveling. You shovel your street rail spot, ride it for a little bit, shovel it some more, and then go to work after that and rake some more on like some other features. And then with a little bit of like Clayton's feature creativity, started feeling kind of a fire to like, oh, I really want to build some cool shit and do all that and build dope parks. I think you could build dope parks. So I started like really getting into like the hand shaping and making everything bosses I could all the time. And I remember one day I finished setting the rail and we were driving. Me and Clayton were driving up the mountain, and Clayton parked the cat. And he's all, "You want to try?" And I hesitated. I was all, "Fuck yeah."
Super
and I jumped
cool.
in. And I remember it was the most terrifying experience I had ever had. Ever. Like, dude, this thing does not drive like it looks.
Well, so was that's such a cool story, but was that just at the top of the mountain, and he was like, "Come on, have a go"?
I was right at the top of Powder Bowl.
Wow.
I remember the spot exactly. It's like that little flat section where there's always a bunch of rollers after the steep pitch at the top. And I just remember he let me drive it for a little bit. And I can tell it made him nervous. So after like 20 minutes, he kicked me out.
Yeah, but at least he gave you a shot, though. You know what I mean? Like, that's cool.
Oh, yeah. I was so pumped. And then I remember the next night I came in and I asked if I could drive the cat again. And he let me do it for a little bit.
Nice. That's awesome.
And then after like, sitting in the machine, probably like sitting passenger seat and all that stuff, they started letting me drive the cat more because they were comfortable with it. And
yeah,
I remember one night they're like, "You want to come in and cover a grooming shift?" I was like, "Sure." And came in, and Carl Klauser is like, "I need this snow on the bunny, so it pushed over here." And I went over there, and I remember like the first 20, 30 minutes being so frustrating. And I just kind of pulled it together and somehow built out a flat ski run just out of trial and error. And I remember I was like, "Fuck, dude, I fucked that shit up." And I remember Carl coming in the next day. He's like, "Thank you for doing exactly what I told you to do."
Oh, that's cool, man. Hell yeah. That's
and then they finally let me in a cat, and I started grooming like the scene, and then they started letting me put my own features in and working in the old miners park and the baby park. And I was like so pumped. And then the season ended, and I went back to pounding nails. I'm sitting there pounding nails, like wishing that I could just be out there building snowboard parks. I didn't care if it was with a rake or a shovel at the time, or a rake or a cat. And I just wanted to build. And my friend was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna move to Telluride." This is my other friend Chris. And he's like, "I'm gonna move to Telluride." He's like, "You should come." I was like, "Where the fuck is that?"
So, as promised, I think now would be a really good time, Chris. I'm going to sprinkle some more of these push road questions in. And our next push road question of the day comes from Peter. I'm going to make an attempt at the last name, Breigner. And Peter asks, Chris, do you think you show too much personal/emotion on social media? The blade dive question there for the push road.
Do I show too much on social media? No. I mean, I'm sure there's bits and points, but, I am a person, and I don't need to hide behind some fake entourage that isn't really there. Everybody's got emotions, and I feel like you got to hide them from everybody. Then what kind of person are you really trying to lead by example to? You want people to bottle stuff up until they get to the point where they fucking blow up and quit. And yeah, we can keep going that route. But man, there's a reason the current park trends of operators are dying. No one gives a crap about each other's feelings. It's all about suck it up, buttercup, get the job done. But yeah, keep telling that to somebody that makes $17 an hour, and eventually they're gonna leave. You gotta express your emotions. Be open. Let people know what's going on. Don't let them think that, oh, the grass is greener on this side when it's really not.
I'll maybe frame that differently. I'll set up Peter's question like this just to piggyback it. Do you think there's a place and time to express your emotions?
Place and a time. Sure. I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I've always tried to wear my emotions on my sleeve a little bit. Just tired of people saying, "Oh yeah, you got it made over there. You got so many resources. You got it so easy. No wonder you could build like that because you got this and that." And it's not really how it is. I go through the same battles as everybody else. Yeah, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, but I ain't trying to hide behind something I'm not.
Yeah, and the people want to know, man. The people want to know who Chris Meyer is. So shout out to Peter for contributing. Deep blade dive question right there. And if you'd like to contribute to the push road question of the day, you can do so by looking for the Instagram story post on either the Tuesday or Wednesday before we record. I'll let you know who I'm chatting with on the blade dive. Jumping back into what we were discussing, I'm curious to know if did that Telluride thing happen that same year that you were getting shown kind of the ropes of the machine, the Snowcat?
I guess I kind of missed that part of the story. So I remember when I met that guy Josh, he was so into it, but he was more into the fabrication side.
Okay.
So he went towards like working on rails, and we hang out every day, like after work and after riding, after I stopped, with my street thing. And he was like my other friend that I could get away from everybody. And we'd always talk about rails, and he was obsessed with rails. And he got on to helping make rails. And I remember he pulled me in to help him. And we made a bunch of rails with Chris Winslow and Dan and Clayton. And I just remember working on so many rails. And I learned a lot of like building rail techniques and all that stuff from those guys.
And that's
started my first little bit of welding experience and all that.
But so this is still that same year, right?
Yeah, that was that summer.
Yeah, so that summer, so you went from winter snow cat, learning how to weld,
Yeah,
opportunity coming at you potentially for Telluride. Dude, that's so much experience
right.
in one go.
I mean, Bear was super supportive, like growing me at the time, and you know, all that raking and shoveling. That Clayton kind of gave me that nickname, Madman, and it stuck with me. And I kind of started living that name out. Like, yeah, dude, I'm gonna fucking go out there and I'm just gonna show everybody how to fucking shovel a perfect shit all day long. And I started getting kind of cocky with it, and I'd like go and side cut the groomers' jumps because I thought they looked like shit at the time.
Dude,
And then
oh my god,
I'd go down, and the hip takeoff was too flat, so I'd spend like 3-4 hours every morning building a tombstone.
Wait.
On the hip. I know we talked about the hip.
Yeah, like I was just
fuck,
gonna
dude, we wanted to go big.
Well, it's hilarious. This is hilarious because we were talking offline, and you were saying, "Oh yeah, I totally agree. I am not a fan of the tombstone Parker on the hip." And I was like, "Dude, I was intimidated by the tombstones on the hips because I didn't, just learning and starting out. I had no interest in going that big, and here you are building tombstones."
Yeah,
okay,
going big was the jam.
Well, good on you, dude.
And I remember at the end of that summer, I was like kind of frustrated because I wasn't getting the cat time I had hoped and all that stuff. And that guy Chris was like, "I want to move to Telluride," and I was like, "I don't know where that is. I've never even heard of that place, but fuck it, let's go." And I went there and somehow got recruited to join their park crew by this guy named John Knowles and John Kelly, or George Knowles and Brian Kelly. And they're like, "We see you got like all this experience, like why don't you come and be a park groomer for us?"
Super cool. So, wow, kind of thrown into the fire there. Nothing you're probably afraid of, though.
And we'd like all watch the snowboard videos, and we'd all look and be like, "How sick is Mammoth? Dude, Mammoth's sick, blah, blah, blah." And we started to want to be like Mammoth because we'd start going there and riding. And at the time, I think it was Pete Colombo was building the jumps. And they were the fucking most funnest jumps we'd ever hit. And we were able to get our nines and our tricks all day long. Middle jump was big and massive, and I remember like we'd go there on the weekends and want to be like Mammoth. That kind of helped fuel some of the fire too, I should say.
Okay, so was Pete stuff the motivation? Maybe fill us in there. Feel like you're leaving out something. What was your communication like with anybody from Mammoth that was allowing you to kind of hone in your skill sets? Because it's kind of sounding like you were up there to ride, but what were you really doing there? You know what I mean?
And I mean, there's a little bit more in there that I kind of left out, like the creepy stuff. Like, I remember we'd go like ride Mammoth, and I was kind of like really obsessed with it. And I remember all my friends would go out and drink, and I was like, "Nah, dude, I'm just gonna crash out," and like they'd leave, and I'd go to A-Frame Liquor and grab a 40 and hitchhike my way up to Main Lodge. And I'd hike my way up between Forest Trail and Main Park, and I'd sit in the woods and watch those guys build. I know it's creepy. It's creepy. It's very creepy. But I'd watch them build.
Yeah, it is super creepy. I mean, I guess it.
I
guess you got to do what you got to do.
And I remember, like, I'm pretty sure that's like right around the same time, like, because I remember like TJ was in there. Because I remember his face very clearly, and I looked him out of the eyes, but I'm pretty sure he had no fucking clue I was there, sitting in the trees, and he was working on middle jump. But I don't know. There's a lot of times that I did that, so I can't sit on something like that and not tell somebody while watching them. That'd be weird. It's still probably pretty weird. After watching those guys at Mammoth, like, put in rails and not have a hand crew there, and we go and ride it the next morning and have the fucking greatest time, and we still didn't see any hand crew. And we're like, these guys do this all by cat. Hand crew doesn't do anything. We like caught on to that. That's kind of, I guess that's what triggered my reasoning to really pursue the cat. Is seeing that, because like, hey, I could do what I do with a rake with a cat after seeing what these guys are doing and putting out and riding it. Bear Mountain weren't on that program. We were still doing shit with the shovels and the rakes, and I remember how old that got, and I didn't want to do it like that no more. I remember getting into it with some of the park guys or the groomer guys about that's not how they do it, and that's not how people do it. When my friend said he went to Telluride and I got the offer to be a park groomer, I just left. I remember I was feeling pretty cocky because Telluride didn't have a park builder at the time anymore. Telluride wasn't known for their park. Nobody ever heard of fucking Telluride. And I was going to go there and crush it. I got in there and they threw me in a park cat, which I'd never run before. Took me out for a training session where we drove around the mountain, and I literally had to learn how to drive a park cat on the spot with the guy in my seat trying to or explaining how to run these things to me. And I wasn't listening. I was terrified. I was at a new place in a snowcat, and I'm expected to perform. And I started pushing snow like I did that one day when Carl had me push out that one project on the bunny slope. And I just started doing that same thing. And I remember looking over it, and the instructor guy was asleep. And I was like, cool, he's not watching me. So I started playing around with the blade and trying to figure out some shit. And I left some pretty big rollers in the fucking ski run. I remember that. And he woke up. He woke up from me backing over one. And he's like, you got to cut through that shit. After that was day one. And then remember the next night, they're like, there's the park. Build it. Well, I had some building experience and some grooming experience, enough to do the job. And I remember when I first set my first box, I tried so hard to get it with the cat. And I finally gave up, got my ass out of the cat and raked it out. And I ended up doing that with like half the features in that park. You know, I started making friends at Telluride and then using their input to make the features better. So I'd always tweak on the features to make it a little bit better, because I no longer used a rake, so I no longer got out of the cat and looked at it. I was just going by feel. And then I started listening to the guys and my friends and doing all that. And it really hurt when your friends tell you your features suck. I'm not going to lie. And then started going that way, and with my building, I was feeling pretty good about it. And then they started kind of letting me do more and more and more of my own thing.
Nice. I think now would be a good time to jump into our first special guest question of the episode. We've got a couple of those I'm going to throw at you. So let's jump into that one. The first one's going to be from Maddie Rowan, and I will play that for you now. Here we go. First special guest question from Maddie.
Yo, what up, blade divers? Chris Meyer, Parker Bohan. I am calling in from Aspen, Colorado today. Long-time listener. Love the show. Love it. Chris, this is your friend Matthew Rowan. Called in to say hello and ask you a couple questions, bud. So, first question. What is your favorite project that we have worked on together? I know we usually don't stay in the same spot for a very long time, but favorite project, and then what do you got in store for the Northwest, bud? You gonna bring your 6 skills up there and set the standard high, I take it. Anywho, I gotta go to work, but have a good day, you guys. See ya.
My favorite project that I've got to work on with Maddie Rowan was one of my first times building in Main Park. And I remember we were both so stoked just to build something different. We just started meshing ideas and putting stuff together, and it just felt like it flowed so good, worked so good, well together. It was just a really fun project to work with Maddie on.
Super cool. Yeah, I was stoked that Maddie wanted to contribute, man. I know you guys are tight, and I thought it would be an awesome addition to the episode. So shout out to Maddie for contributing. And, dude, I don't know, man. What do you think about that Pacific Northwest thing he was inquiring about? What you got there? You got something in store?
I'm here just to milk it.
Oh, I call bullshit on that.
I'm old. It's time to retire. Not do anything.
Whatever, man.
Yeah.
So you're just going to kick your feet up, chill?
Maybe. Just have to wait and see.
Ooh. The old wait and see. All right, then. Cool. Well, again, thanks to Maddie for contributing. Hope you're well, dude. Chris, jumping back into this, we've talked about it offline. I've talked about it with several other people who have been on the show, but do you feel like you're complete when you're in the machine, almost as if it's an extension of yourself?
Building to me is like it's being able to escape from my mind. You know, all I think about is snow, snowcats, park, and riding. It's one of those things that are always on my mind, and I've learned through building, doing frees your mind. Instead of thinking about it, just doing it and making it happen. In that moment, you can become essentially your machine. There is no thinking, there is no nothing. It's just you and the machine and the snow all flowing together.
Maybe piggyback that previous question with this one. Do you think that your thought process kind of slows when you're in the machine, almost as if to make anything that you're doing undefinable? Like you can't really explain how that came to be or how you do things? Because I know you talk about, mentoring or teaching people or talking to people about how you do things, but what do you think about your slowing down there, your flow state?
That's a hard one to explain, but I know like some of the people that I've had the opportunity to work with got a chance to experience it. But when I get into that trance and I start building, I don't even really know it happened until I snap out of it, and I just look upon what force or whatever created that.
Since we're on the topics that are deep blade dives, I've got another special guest question for you, and it comes from Mr. Yosh, Joshua Yosh Hydorn. I'll play it for you now.
Hey, Chris, it's Yosh. Thanks for letting me call a question into the blade dive. When we first met, you were a manager and a builder in Telluride. And since then, you've moved around quite a bit. Mammoth, Boreal, Mount Hood Meadows. And I was just curious if you were in search of another leadership role like that at Telluride again. And what specifically would that look like if you were going to take another leadership role? What would your crew look like? What would the situation be?
Amazing person. To learn to live, because in reality it is a job. And I've allowed myself to be fully consumed by it and took it all in. Kind of lost myself as a person. I guess that's why I kind of refer to myself as not who I am, but what I am. Consuming myself within my work day in and day out. I became this thing. I can see where across people I've worked for, I really am that thing, and I'm no longer a person. And sometimes you wonder if you even are a person. Gonna be the biggest thing I got to learn is how to be not what, but who.
Yeah, that's big of you. I think that it's difficult. Yeah, if manager leadership role and you're trying to be involved, being over involved sometimes, or being consumed by whatever it is that you do for a job, can definitely have some consequences. Wow, man, that was a hell of an answer.
And I spent so much of my life just so consumed into it. There are years that went past where all I did, day and night, any waking moment, was thinking about building, how I was going to build, what I was going to build, and then how I was going to ride it. I ended up not, at the end there, not really having very many friends because I no longer even rode. I was just so consumed on building and how great can make the parks and spend so much time and effort into building those parks. You wake up the next day and it's time to go back to work because you spent all your free time trying to rest.
Let's stay on these deep dive questions. So you and I have talked offline for, since the beginning of the year putting this together, but do you feel like you are misunderstood as an operator, as a person, and maybe that you are mismanaged?
I do. I feel like recently I've had an opportunity to work with lots of builders all across the board. And, like I was saying, like having a little bit of emotion, you get some serious pushback from people, you know. Um, some people will call you a bitch because you felt something, or they see like, I guess not see, they just don't understand like I'm so connected into, or so far down the rabbit hole, I should say, into this park thing that essentially it is my life. It is my well-being. And right now, until I figure out who I am, that is what I am. And I can't necessarily tap out of it. So I'll get in situations where I'm building with other people, on the same canvas, and with my efficiencies and techniques and ability that I've acquired through my years, stuff happens fast, and I start taking up more and more and more of the canvas. And I understand that they see it as like, oh, this dude's got an ego and he just wants to build everything. But they really don't understand that part of it, that I'm that's just me. I'm doing me at this point. Like right now, when I'm in that snowcat, that's me out there living. And I don't know any other way to do it. I said recently I've had the opportunity to work with builders, but up until the last couple years, the first 16 years of my snowcat career, I've been on my own, to fend myself, to work by myself, to build by myself. Yeah, I've taught quite a few people on the way, but I've had nobody teach me. Nobody has sat in my cat and told me anything. Fuck, I've barely even got opportunities to have people that ride it sit in my cat. Nobody's got time for that shit. And I understand everybody's got a life. Nobody wants to sit in the passenger seat of your cat, right?
Do you feel like you're having? We talked about this the other day. Do you feel like you're having to constantly defend yourself?
A little bit.
And does that in an abrasive way defend yourself or justify the defense at all?
Yeah, it's because people can't wrap their head around the simple concept. The reason I do what I do and how I do things is solely for the fucking one damn reason why we all started this. The shred. It's all about the ride. It's all I've ever been focused on. What is fun? What is safe? Like, people don't understand that. They think it's like, oh, he just wants to build all these cool features. No, it's like if you look in depth of the entire park, I want the whole thing to flow together. I want all of us to have fun. And I don't want just us good riders to have fun. I want that mom and pop to have fun. I want that middle-aged man to have fun. I also want that 80-year-old dude to come in here and have fun. Like, that's what it's about, is like in an industry that's fading fast as far as like our livelihood in park, is we all need to like start working together and create products where we invite everybody to come do what we do, enjoy what we do, right? Like, that seems to be like such a disconnect because for some reason the jumps keep getting bigger. Like, don't get me wrong, I love to build big ass jump, but who's that for? 2 guys that ride the resort all day, you know? Like, I understand like half pipe, we got that, but it's something else that might not be rideable for everybody. Like, let's make stuff that everybody can ride. Let's all have fun together. And where that can go from there on out could be so much bigger than just growing jumps taller and longer, just fucking setting more damn rails in the ground. Like, come on now. Like, let's move out of what's been going on for the last 3 decades. Like, no one gives a shit about your slopestyle course. Like, what everybody cares about is this family fun cross park over here that they could ride with their kids and their fucking parents and their brothers and their sisters and cousins. Like, let's all do this together. Like, we need to start bringing people back to the damn industry, right? Stop pushing them away because it's too hard. Nobody can hit the 30. You know how many people, average person, can hit a jump bigger than 30 foot? Come on. Like, really? Like, look at your people. Like, yes, you have to have that to attract them, but you need to have something for them.
I'm liking this conversation because it's deep. We'll come back to it, but let's jump on the push road again real quick with a question from Taylor Stout with a push road question. And Taylor says, first of all, you always answer my DMs. Thank you for that. And he asks, what's your favorite rail feature you've set? Thanks, Taylor, for the question.
My favorite rail feature I've ever set is definitely going to be setting up the plaza rail at Mammoth up against the deck rail as a street style rail. Aesthetically and just all around, it was a good feature. I really just enjoyed the look of it and the way it rode and the footage that came from it. It was like bringing the street to the park.
Sounds like a fun feature for sure, dude. I want to switch gears and go into kind of the advice thing because you've been around some pretty profound operators that have contributed to your career. And maybe you've got something that they told you during the time you spent with them. Maybe it was a life lesson. Maybe it was a tip or trick in the machine, whatever it is. But the piece of advice that maybe has stuck with you for your whole career or at least a lengthy period of time. You got any of that for us?
The one I remember that sticks out the most is one I use still to this day. I remember I was having a hard day. I just burn out from so many hours and shoveling. And I remember sitting in the cat in the passenger seat one night, and I was just unloading my story to Clayton. And Clayton said to me, Life's not about the grass being greener on the other side. It's finding a way to balance on the fence. And that just really, I really felt that, being a gibber and just how everything was going on in life was like, he was right. It's not about if the grass is green or brown. If you find your way to stand on the fence, you can see in both yards and enjoy both aspects of it and take what you want out of it. So we're always sat on that one for a lot of my career, and I still use that to this day. Like when I get bummed, I try to use that and start weighing out the goods and the bads, and being a Libra myself, staying that balance really helps keep centered.
Yeah, definitely. I feel you on that one. I like that perspective from Clayton. Clayton the sensei. We need to get Clayton on the blade dive. I'm gonna say that again. Okay, well, let's turn the page and maybe talk about some of the bad advice that you maybe don't want us to hear that you would be willing to share. You got any of that?
This has got to be built like this. It's the worst fucking advice I've ever heard. Everybody's got their own direction and their own way of doing things. You can coach them, but don't ever say this is how it's got to be.
Well, okay, are you talking about a my way or the highway perspective there when it comes to operating equipment, a certain style that somebody has deployed in different jobs that they may have done in the past, and they're managing you and they're saying, hey, this is how I need you to do it? Or are you talking about somebody being excited about a new opportunity that they're giving you and explaining to you how they'd like to have it done, and maybe you're not seeing eye to eye either way? What are you talking about there? Are you talking about a new way of doing things? What's up with that?
There's always a better way to do something. And yeah, I guess the worst advice you can give to somebody is saying this is how it's done. This is how it's always been done. Any of that shit. I mean, that's a joke, because this, in reality, snowcats and snow parks, it's still so new. We haven't perfected it. We haven't mastered it. We don't even know what they're capable of in the long run. Yeah, we covered the basics of pushing snow and, making nice corduroy and making things a little bit sharper and squarer. But we haven't really jumped into what these machines are capable of and what we're capable of doing with snow. So there is no, this is how we do it, and this is how it's always been done. Who gives a fuck how it's always been done? There's an easier way.
Okay, I see where you're coming from now. Just whether it's a teaching moment or whether it's a conversation that you're having, whatever it is, there are multiple ways to accomplish moving material, building something, and maybe you're thinking that giving someone the opportunity to figure it out themselves is a good thing, but don't necessarily shove something down their throat. Okay. What would you say to that older generation of operator that has a certain way of doing things?
Nobody gives a fuck how you used to do it. That's all I gotta say, is nobody gives a fucking shit on how you used to do it or how you've done it or anything like that. You can guide people, but don't fucking tell them how to do it.
All right, I'll pivot and I'm gonna draw from Yosh's question with respect to just management opportunities, but leading by example, teaching, do you think leading and teaching are two different things?
Teaching and leading, in my opinion, are two different things, because you don't have to be a leader to teach. Half the leaders can't teach you. I don't know how to dive into that one again. That one's a very...
Well, let's dissect it this way. Let's start off with leading by example that you and I have talked about before. Who's maybe somebody that you think properly leads by example, whether it's a project or a department or whoever that is? Who is that?
Frank Wells is, I'd say, the epitome of lead by example. That dude can create and show you how to create it and guide you in your own way, not just in the one way. I've had times with Franks, but very limited time in the cat with him. But I could see it through his work and the people he's worked with, the lives that he's impacted. Just the impact he's made across the industry is really well known.
So let's rewind a little bit. What was your experience like at Telluride? Because kind of sounds like, as I've mentioned to you before, that you were given the keys to something. Maybe that's with respect to an opportunity, and you had to figure out how you were going to expand on that. But what was your experience at Telluride like?
To be honest, Telluride was a battle. More or less, the roles in management shifted again, and we got a new mountain director. And the new mountain director, one of the guys I look up to towards as like a good leader, John Kelly, he came into the scene, and he was new to his position, but he had an open mind, and he listened to the employees, and he started listening to me and the rest of the crew. And I kept promoting, like, hey, we need good parks, new parks. And then he asked if I'd be open to the idea of running the terrain park. So I applied for the job and did the interview stuff. And after they interviewed a shit ton of people, a bunch of big names, I won't even say, but he decided that he was going to give me a chance. So I got the position as manager at Telluride. And I was like, you know what? This is my shot. At the time, park grooming was under grooming. And I started working my way through that managed position and acquired the cats and brought the cats back into the park.
Nice. Let's jump back into the push road and hit another question. This one is they want to remain anonymous. That's cool. I respect that. They are asking you, Chris. They say, Chris, you seem to post a lot of your work on social media as a self-esteem boost. Curious to know what your goals are for your skill set. And would you ever consider joining or being a part of a smaller or private resort so that you could potentially be more of yourself, a bit more freedom? Thought that was a good question.
It's a good question, but I do it to inspire other builders. What's capable of snowcat, what's capable of built out of snow, what's possible, and just trying to push it and see how far we can go. Yes, I like to maybe highlight my skills or whatnot, but I'm just like everybody else. I'm still trying to climb that pay scale ladder, since that seems to be a thing. What skills you're good at, what you have, what you bring to the table, how efficient you are, and all that stuff. Yeah, you should highlight that stuff. How else is anybody gonna know what you're capable of?
Tag the blade dive. What do you think about that private resort question that they had there, that two-parter, that second half of that one? Do you think that would help you be more of yourself? You and I have talked about a lot of deep stuff about you on this podcast, but do you think that that's a pertinent question of the day?
See, what I'm looking for is, I don't know what they call the golden egg, a place where you can go and your skills are appreciated and you can make a good, honest living doing what you love. I mean, that's what we all search for, right? Just trying to get to that level. We build our skills and get all that so you can make money, you can live a good life, you can go and do things, be free, and do all this other stuff.
Well, let's talk about that golden egg that you mentioned. Is that what you thought Mammoth was going to be? When did you transition there? How did that go?
I was pretty much working myself to death at that point. Give up all my free time, and I would always be doing something with the park. I neglected my family a little bit, or a lot of it at the time. And, between working myself to death and stupid resort politics that you don't necessarily always agree with, and then the fact that my chick at the time left and taken my 2 kids and told me she was never coming back. I kind of had a reality check and started chatting with TJ, and he offered me a really good gig to come out to be a supervisor and run the crew. So I packed up and went to Mammoth to check it out, and I showed up right when they started Super Park. I didn't think too much of it. I was like, cool, they're building some cool shit again. And that's when I really started to get to work with other operators, was my first real experience working with other people. Because then I was working with Yosh, and I was working with Matt Rowan and Slammer and TJ and Scott Cherry. I was working with all these big names, and I was excited. And then all the other teams showed up, and there's even more big names like Joe Genovese and Benny McGinnis. There's so many well-known builders in this one spot. And I remember I was so intimidated, so excited. Really interesting. But yeah, Mammoth with so much history and so many good builders coming out of there, and such a solid park program over the years, whether it was Pete or Oren or TJ. Mammoth has always been that icon, right? And being one of the most beautiful places in the world that you could actually visit or live really sets the tone for that place. And then you involve all the talent of different kinds of people, like instructors, riders, builders, so much talent just flows through that place. The vibe, everything just makes it so appealing.
I'm gonna rewind again and mention a point you brought up earlier about doing this for the shred and in the riding, and maybe you rewind yourself and kind of draw from your Telluride days. But is that still why you do it? Is it still why you build park features?
Early on, it started why can't we have perfect shit to ride every day, right? That's where the hand cruise shit started. I was like, why isn't everything perfect all the time? Because it's fun when it looks good and smooth and perfect. It's fun that way. And I started, as I started falling away more from how good I was at riding, I became more in tune with how the features rode, which inevitably became how they're safe they became, or so to say. There was a point there where I wasn't a very good builder yet, but I could see these features hurting my friends and all that stuff. And I didn't want that in my parks at all. And, that opened the door for me listening to my friends at Telluride give me input on, oh, yeah, this is sketch. This doesn't ride good and all that. And I started changing it and changing how the features are and what made them scary and what made them safe, and trying different techniques. steepening stuff up to see if the impact would change it and all that, and playing with those little things. And then with those rules that came into place at Telluride, that really helped me with the learning curve, because we couldn't build the big feature, so I had to focus on making shit safe and all that stuff. And I became manager, and safety became the law of our park. And I made it a point that way. And I started working with the risk management and the other operations departments, as well as the lawyers, and creating a park that was safe, aesthetically pleasing, and fun to ride. And we chased those 3 goals, and then eventually gave birth to what is Telluride program now, so to say. And and once the statistics started playing out in year 3, we actually had a list, and we can say, hey, we've cut down injuries 85% over the last 3 years, which is a huge number across the industry. And then we were comparing numbers. Okay, we dramatically decreased it that way, but our park is still growing, right? In my last year as a manager, we had it so dialed that we went through a whole year, 0 injuries, and we had 165 features in 3 parks.
Crazy. All right, so we got to keep peeling back some layers, peeling back the onion that is Chris Meyer, until we maybe start to cry a little bit. But your successes and failures, everybody wants to know, man. What do you think were some of your successes, or maybe how you define some of your successes in the Snowcat or as a manager?
I think
wherever you want to take it.
Most successful thing in my career right now is seeing the people that have actually taken the time to listen to what I've had to show them and take off with it. I guess inspiring people. That would be the fact that what I'm doing actually inspires people to do the same. And I mean, in reality, that's all you can ever ask for, right? Is people to want to believe and do the same things that you're trying to accomplish, and to see them do it and succeed. That's a fucking huge success, right?
For sure. Let's go deep blade dives in life. Have you ever had one where you kind of struggled to get back to grade? What did that recovery look like? I know I've been throwing a lot of heavy questions at you tonight, man, but just we're peeling back the layers of Chris Meyer here.
My recent embarkment of being a manager at my last place of employment, I dug in so deep to try to make an impression on higher ups and my superior at the time that I started to more or less affect the people that I really cared about, the guys that were under me as my crew. And they were also really good friends of mine, and I've been so focused on carrying out the tasks, the needs of what the resort wanted from me. I kind of set aside their wants and their needs, and created probably a really bad experience for them.
Okay, so inspirations that would lead to good experiences. Maybe who has been somebody in your life that's been an inspiration within the ski industry?
I'm going to give it out to Yosh. He's able to coach me about, I wouldn't say coach, but his outlook, his passion, his thought process. So intriguing to me. I guess it's like the exact opposite of how my mind works. I don't see it from necessarily other people's sides all the time, and he's helped really bring that into context. Even based on his conversation, he's helping me refine who I am as a person instead of just being this thing that I've created.
Yosh. Shout out to Yosh. I'm going to start calling him Hydorn. Hydorn, what it do? What does good leadership look like to you then? If you've got an example, but what does that look like? I know we talked about an individual, but what does that look like maybe if you weren't to personify it?
Great leadership is, to me, is being out there and working with your crew, listening to your crew, not just dictating, more or less like helping your crew. I feel like the best managers are the ones that help their crew, give them the resources that they need to accomplish the job, and aren't as focused on the job, but more focused on the employee and helping the employee accomplish that job. I don't know if that really makes sense, but like, we got so many managers and leaders out here, especially in the ski industry, that are really good at talking, really good at budgeting and planning and all this stuff on paper, but they look fucking stupid when they get on the ski hill and they don't have a damn clue what their employees are doing or how shit's getting done or how it needs to get done or what's happening out there, the elements, the things you're up against. Like, there's just so much that leaders neglect nowadays, and you really see it because that's part of the reason, I think, in my opinion, why there is very few park builders out there, is because these people don't listen. They're not giving the resources. They're not helping. They're not. People driving the industry aren't being heard. They're being put to work to get the job done versus they should be leading the charge to show us where to go next.
Deep thoughts from Chris Meyer. I feel like we're continuing to peel back more layers, man. We've been talking for quite some time, but I want to know, before we jump off air here, what do you think about the future? Where's that headed for the industry?
It's hard to say what the future will become and where it's going, and all it is just, it could just be a fad, but it's also the direction I see it going inevitably is there will be more terrain parks, but the terrain parks that we view now and what they will be are two completely different things. I think the industry is very quick to move away from the big ass jumps, and it's going to move more towards the flow creative side of it, where, like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's going to be more family orientated, more open for everybody to enjoy. That's where things are going to go, and terrain parks will become more enhanced terrain style. Like, you'll see them all over the mountain, but it's more just enhanced terrain.
Well, Chris, I really want to take a minute and say thank you for taking the time to join me on the podcast. For those listening, it's a big initiative for the guest. There's a lot of logistical pieces, and I'm so grateful for everybody's time that has contributed thus far, including yours. So, Chris, it's been a labor of love, and I'm grateful, man. Thanks for being a part of this.
No worries. Happy to do it.
Huge thank you to Chris Meyer for being this week's Blade Dive episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do so. It would mean a lot to me. Leave a review. Shoot us with a 5-star. That would be big too. It does help the show if you can do that. And make sure you're following us on social media at The Blade Dive. If you're taking pictures and you want to post those, tag us using the hashtag The Blade Dive. Okay, you know the deal. Don't be a dick. Fill your machine with diesel at the end of your shift, please.